transience. Everything is transience, nothing is permanent, everything is transient, everything is fleeting, nothing lasts. This is apparently the axis which we've chosen the world to turn upon. There used to be a time when you owned everything you watched and everything you listened to, and the car you drove to work in, and the house that you lived in, and you owned everything around you. But now, that's no longer the case. Everything you watch, you don't own. You're only renting a license to temporarily partake in it. You have no rights whatsoever. If you want to buy a blank CD, apparently you have to pay a tax to the media companies because blank CDs are the spawn of the devil. This makes absolutely no sense to me at all. I don't know why blank CDs are being demonized. Who the fuck even buys blank CDs in the first place? And blank CD tax is just the start of an iceberg which I see coming, which certain people across certain oceans have chosen to make the hill upon which they die. Apparently this is the progressive cause they want to dedicate their lives to, purely out of some altruistic sense of duty, with no favors or influence exchanging hands, nothing of that kind whatsoever. A link tax has been proposed for no particular reason to make sharing of things that you did not create yourself illegal, or at least taxable for some reason. And if you share said link and you click on said link, you have to pay people money. This is the equivalent of telling someone you saw a movie and describing a scene and then having to pay a tax because you recreated a scene which the media gods did not intend you to recreate. None of this makes any sense. Fucking Netflix is great while it is the way it is, but like we've come to know, good things don't last in the technology industry, driven either by the drive for higher profits or some kind of misguided understanding of what they think the consumer consciousness is. To try to better serve that, they either compromise their initial mission statement, or they go to some new service or expand their current service, or just overall compromise what they set out to do in the first place. Google was a search company once. Once upon a time, Google was just a search company. And now they own the world. Or Google's not even Google anymore. It would be more technically correct to say Alphabet. Alphabet rule everything. I think the name Alphabet itself is some kind of sick joke on the fact that they have their thumbs in literally every pie you can think of from A to Z. That's where I think the joke comes from. I don't see why they thought this was a good idea to set themselves up as an evil corporation. I think if you're writing science fiction in the present time, you have a lot of material to work with, and I envy you. And instead of Cyberdyne, your evil mega corporation might as well be called ABC Inc. It's a little on the nose, but I think it works. Feel free to use that. Send me a t-shirt when it becomes famous. Everything is fleeting. Life is a never-ending series of microtransactions that have become less and less micro, to the point where one skin in Overwatch now costs $10. There was a time when games used to cost $60, and that was it, and you never had to pay them again, and you could play it over and over without spending a single dollar after that initial purchase, and you'd get hours and hours of entertainment, as many as you could care to stand. This was the standard. We have entirely compromised this, seeking some kind of lower initial investment, fooling ourselves into thinking that such a thing is good for our bottom line, when eventually it is not. In the same way that Facebook as a free service is a laughable proposition, because Facebook is not free in any sense of the word. They're an information mafia. They steal information from you under the guise of providing a social media service. That's their main business. This whole social media enterprise is a farce. It's a ruse to steal your data. That is how they make money. The ads as well. But the ads are driven primarily by analytics and data tracking. So what is their primary use for you as a cog in the system? It's to extract your information. And data security is not even a thing, and people don't take it seriously at all. Whatever information you thought was private and kept to yourself is most likely, if not already, going to be on the internet at some point, available to any number of dark web people who like purchasing people's information to do credit card fraud, identity theft, or anything of the kind. Our society is informationally compromised. Information has been the most valuable currency for the past 2,000 years at least, if not more. Information has been used to decide the fate of many, the decision that changed the course of human history, and it's something that we can't prevent at all. We have no idea how to control it. It's infinitely replicable. If it leaks once, it's available ad infinitum. How do you stop this? I have no idea. Tech companies are a plague upon the universe, and we've been deceived into believing them purely because they showed up with a new friendly face. And for some reason we thought, hey, I don't like Comcast, but I like Facebook because Facebook is made by young hip people, and surely they can't be up to anything bad. Well, you know, Instagram apparently is going down the shithole because there are creators left, because Facebook was getting too up in Instagram's business. Even the people who invented Instagram, which is basically just an ad marketplace at this point with sponsorships all over the place. If even Instagram is ethically compromised, what do we have left? Twitter is losing money every day. I don't know how they're going to monetize that. The internet itself is a deceptive tool to control the populace because it's infinitely monitorable. There's no freedom on the internet. Whatever you do can be traced, tracked, and quantified. In a way, the internet is actually a more governmentally friendly mode of communication than anything before it, because phone lines had to be manually tapped, and the internet does not. You can set up an information monitoring scheme that can surveil billions of people with very little expense comparatively. We're being infinitely watched every second of every day. If you think you're not, I suggest you read more, because you almost certainly are, unless you live in an RV that you bought secondhand with cash, have zero electronics of any kind, have never purchased anything on the internet ever, have no credit cards or any financial products of any variety. You exist purely on cash that you obtained from, I am assuming, exchanging your original cash for other cash all around the country so that you can't be traced in any way. And then you develop some kind of Faraday cage so they can't listen in on you. And then you find a place that's entirely unsurveilled all over the world, by drone, by satellite, by anything. Once you've done all those things, you might have a half chance of being one step away from being surveilled at any time. Because even if they don't have the setup to monitor you currently, they can very easily have that setup ready by tomorrow. I don't understand how people are not constantly paranoid about everything. I am not, most of the time. Sometimes I fall into paranoia, like right now. And every time I think about it, even for 5 seconds, it makes me wonder why we chose to give up the freedoms that we have for some sort of pretend convenience which we don't even really need. People were perfectly social before this, and if anything, This is what they call overexposure. When you lie on the beach for too long under the sun, you end up getting a sunburn. You don't come out with, you know, a perfect complexion or whatever. You either get skin cancer or you get a sunburn, right? If you need controlled exposure, you need short bursts. Being constantly connected 24/7 for every day of your life, whether you want to or not, is, I think, ultimately going to be detrimental for us, as we've already seen the signs of this. Whether this will lead us to evolve further in the direction that we need to cope with this constant sense of connectedness. And I somewhat disagree with the people who live off grid saying they lose nothing, because you do lose a lot when you're not connected. And that's part of the pull. That's part of the sell. That's part of the gimmick. That's how they get you. Being connected does feel amazing when it's positive. When it's negative, it feels equally worse. And obviously, as someone in my position, the negative thoughts don't go away, but the positive ones do, because that's what humans are programmed to do, is seek out negative thought, because we're self-correcting, and for correction, you need an error to correct. So we're always seeking errors. We're machines that seek errors and seek to correct them, except we don't realize that we can't, and no one told us this. And that's basically what the entire world is a set of machines optimized for certain ends, which never realize them. They always just pursue them, but never arrive at an end. And so we're an incredibly inefficient system that has become so stuck in our inefficiencies that instead of choosing to relish the inefficiency and appreciating it for what it is, which is ultimately what we are inefficiency. That's why we are the way we are. You know, if we wanted to be perfectly efficient, we'd probably be like a hive mind. And speaking of hive minds, I saw a TED Talk a few years ago, and that guy was mostly just blabbering nonsense, but he did say one thing. He said the internet is like a collective of human consciousness and knowledge, the likes of which we've never seen before. And I agreed with him to some extent. And one of the things that made me curious about this was books and storytelling, in a way, are similar attempts. Like, if you read a book, you're reading from someone else's point of view, you're absorbing someone else's conscious thought that's been tailored, obviously, for better ingestion. Like, stream of consciousness actively subverted this by making it more difficult to absorb, by making it more real-time and more akin to what a normal person would think. But even curated, a person's thoughts are still a person's thoughts. And when you absorb them, you're intaking another person's point of view. So then what would you say about a message board? It's just thousands, hundreds and thousands of people who all share their point of view, and they're all voices in your head because you're reading it out loud to yourself. And even if you're not reading it out loud to yourself, even if you're watching a video, you're seeing someone else's point of view, you're seeing reactions to it. And if it's not in real time, does it matter? Because even non-real-time access to this level of opinion and information was not possible before, and I don't think we fully understood why the internet has had such a profound effect the way that it has in the past 10 to 20 years. Since social media really became a thing, this effect has taken off, I feel, to some regard, because we're actively encouraged to incorporate other people into our lives. Now let me give you a little example. If you lived in 1850, anywhere in the world, chances are the number of people you thought about or saw per day was less than 10. You saw your family, you saw whatever vendors you bought your food from, or the vendors that you traded your grown food to barter for other food. You didn't really see that many people, even if you lived in a city. And at that time, the majority of the population did not live in cities, unlike what they do now. If you lived back then, chances are you lived in the country and you didn't see that many people. So you were most of the time alone. And I think all of human history has been a movement toward greater unity. Now, unity may seem like the wrong word because unity is often associated with positive connotations, and I'm not being a very good postmodernist right now by saying that all of human history this or that, but hear me out for a second, okay? So in the beginning we just had small groups, and my unity is group unity, by the way. We had just small groups of like bands of 20 or whatever, tribes which were bigger, and then they formed like mini nations, and then like city-states, and like I guess there were parishes and hamlets and villages before that, separated by vast swaths of country, and there were kingdoms, and there was, as we got more and more towards the present day, there were of course regressive periods. I'm not saying the movement has been linear in one direction. Alexandria was lost, we lost a lot of knowledge, went back like hundreds of years, and there were the Dark Ages, 1,000 years of nothingness. But conflict and group conflict has been a constant source of anxiety for the human race, and we're moving in a direction where the groups that are conflicting are larger and larger groups. And I'm not sure whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. So there were a time when there were just warring tribes of 50 people just attacking each other, and they'd kill everyone and then steal people's houses and belongings, and kidnap their people who didn't fight and everything. And then there were kingdoms where kings did that to each other, and then the kings became emperors, and the emperors became mega emperors, I don't know. Then they became presidents. Now they're still presidents, some prime ministers. They all just create wars and fight for no reason all over the world. And there's all this inequality, which has become like painfully apparent with the internet, because we have unprecedented access to even the lowest ring of society. Just the step just above the lowest, so I guess almost the lowest, second from last, I guess. The ones who are able to put enough food in their mouth, and somehow were given a cell phone, we know what they're thinking. And there's just this increased awareness of the condition of everyone on the planet. And you see the lines in the sand, and you think, why were they drawn this way? And you realize they're because it's centuries of war. Centuries of war have hammered out these lines, and in the past 150 years, we've come to a conclusion that there need not be any more conquest for some reason, because I don't see any reason why conquest is still not justified, and how that can be reconciled with the system that these lines should exist the way that they exist now. Because if these lines exist the way that they do, then you're claiming that they're justified based on the methods that were used to draw them in the first place. But the methods that were used to draw them in the first place are no longer condoned. So this would be, for example, if you conquered a country using a slave army, and the only problem with that was that you were using slaves, but you still get to keep the country afterwards. Does it matter what you did? Because the end, you were not forced to pay for what you did. The results are the same. It's just that now you have to do a false apology. And your apology may be sincere, but how can an apology be sincere if you don't correct the action that you took in the first place? If I steal your candy and I throw it on the ground, and I apologize to you, or I eat the candy, let's say. I steal your candy and I eat it. And I apologize for eating your candy, and then I just go about my merry way. This does not make any sense to me. It just means that I was justified in stealing your candy because I was not forced to pay any price for doing so. I don't see why this discourages further conquest in the future, and we can see that in the Far East, where Mr. Putin has annexed Crimea. He might as well annex the Ukraine the next time he hosts whatever world event. Who knows what can happen, Primary resources are no longer very useful, and that's why the lines in the sand haven't changed. Is because people know the primary resources aren't useful, so as a false token of peace, we're told that the lines in the sand are perfectly fine, and that no further redrawing of the lines will occur. Which is actually a false mercy, because the lines have already been drawn the way that the people like the lines want them drawn. So there's no point in redrawing them because they're very happy with where they are. Their position has been established, their status earned through bloodshed and centuries of oppression. And I don't understand why we accept this. Is just the way it is. There's radical injustice through the centuries that has never been paid for. Changing or claiming to have changed an ideology which caused millions lifetimes of suffering, and then not taking any action to correct the injustices that were caused in generations past, is no justice at all. I don't see why this is the case. George Orwell was perfectly right, I'm not even talking about surveillance here. I'm talking about the never-ending proxy wars that are used to justify production and investment in certain industries that don't deserve either. Our infrastructure is crumbling because there's no point in maintaining infrastructure for a country which you will no longer be ruling in the next half century or half decade. It doesn't make any sense to do anything long term because the world is transient and we're all going to fade into the mist as just rabid consumers of a system that encourages us not to hold anything permanent, but to discard it, whether that be what you watch, what you eat. Nothing is valuable. Everything can be replaced. Nothing has any intrinsic value. The intrinsic value of your time even can be quantified. You going to help an elderly person in their home can be quantified. You performing any act of altruism can be quantified and replaced. You can be replaced. Your intentions have no value. Anything that you do can be duplicated. Anything that you create is worthless. Anything that you imagine is stolen. Nothing is valuable. Everything is useless. The world is fading, and I don't know why.